The battlefield was a mess. Bodies of fallen soldiers scattered the ground, their blood staining the earth beneath them. The air was thick with smoke, the remnants of explosions lingering in the atmosphere. The male warrior, a strong and determined figure, moved quickly through the chaos. His armor was dented, his face marked with the dirt of battle, but his eyes burned with a fierce intensity. He had fought long and hard, but it wasn't the enemy soldiers that caught his attention now. It was something else, something more powerful. He had been ordered to retreat, to save himself and his men, but something kept him moving forward. There was a cry, distant at first, but it grew louder with each passing second. A cry for help. He followed the sound, pushing past the wreckage, and found her, tied to a pillar, her hands bound and her body bruised. She was unconscious, her hair tangled and matted with dirt, but there was no mistaking her identity. She was the woman meant to die. Her people had betrayed her, leaving her as nothing more than a pawn in a game they had already lost. But there was something about her, something that made him hesitate. Her name was Zara, the last living heir of a fallen kingdom. She was supposed to be dead by now, her life taken by the very people who had once called her their own. Yet here she was, alive against all odds, and in need of a savior. But could he be that savior? Was it even wise to risk his life for someone like her? He didn't know the answer, but as he looked into her face, something inside him stirred. It wasn't just pity. It was something else, a burning desire to help, to protect. With a deep breath, he drew his sword and cut the ropes that bound her. Her eyes snapped open as the ropes fell to the ground. For a moment, their gazes locked, his dark, determined eyes meeting her wild, defiant ones. She didn't say a word, but the look she gave him spoke volumes. She was no helpless damsel. No, Zara was a warrior in her own right. She had survived this long for a reason. Without hesitation, she stood up, her movement swift and sharp. She reached for a dagger that was hidden beneath her tattered cloak and placed herself in front of him, ready to fight if necessary. But the warrior stepped forward, his hand outstretched, urging her to follow him. "We need to go." "It's not safe here," he said, his voice low but firm. Zara glanced at him, sizing him up. He was tall, strong, someone who could fight his way out of nearly any situation. But did she trust him? Did she have any reason to? "You don't know me," she replied, her voice a mix of defiance and vulnerability. "Why should I follow you?" The warrior didn't have an answer, but he didn't need one. His instincts told him that he couldn't leave her behind, that whatever fate awaited them, they would face it together. They ran, side by side, weaving through the chaos, fighting off soldiers who tried to stop them. As they reached the edge of the battlefield, Zara stumbled slightly, her legs weakening from the injury she'd taken earlier. The warrior caught her, steadying her as she looked up at him, her eyes flickering with something that almost resembled gratitude. But just as quickly as it appeared, it disappeared, replaced by that same defiant fire. "You saved me, but now you'll regret it," she whispered, her lips curling into a smirk that sent a shiver down his spine. "I won't be your charity." He didn't know why, but her words sent a jolt of electricity through him. She wasn't like the others. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind, to challenge him. There was power in her words, and he couldn't deny the magnetic pull he felt toward her. The warrior opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a shadow loomed over them. They both turned to see a figure in the distance, a man riding a horse, his silhouette dark against the dying light of the battlefield. He was coming toward them with an unnatural speed. "Keep moving," the warrior muttered, his hand on his sword as he prepared for what was to come. But Zara stood still. She didn't run, didn't flinch. She stared at the approaching figure with a calm, unflinching gaze. Her hand rested on the hilt of her own weapon, ready for whatever came next. The warrior turned to look at her, but before he could speak, Zara's voice cut through the silence. "He's not here for me. He's here for you." The figure drew closer, and it was then that the warrior saw it, his enemy, a man he had crossed paths with before. A man who had once been an ally but now an enemy who would stop at nothing to see him dead. "Get ready," the warrior said, his voice steady. He knew this fight would be different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about something more. Zara, with her eyes locked on the approaching figure, smirked. "I hope you're ready to lose," she said, her tone dripping with a dangerous confidence. Just as the enemy's figure came into full view, a gust of wind swept through the air. The tension between the warrior and Zara was palpable, thick enough to cut through. The warrior couldn't help but ask, his voice laced with uncertainty, "What happens if I survive?" Zara's eye sparkled with mischief. "You'll find out. But trust me, it won't be easy." With that, the enemy reached them, and the fight began. The battle rages on, but as the warrior faces off against his enemy, he feels a deep, unsettling question gnawing at him. Is Zara truly the ally he thought she was, or is there more to her than he realizes? Naughty question for the comment section. What do you think Zara's true intentions are? Is she just playing the warrior, or does she have something else in mind? Let us know your thoughts. The warrior stood at the edge of the darkened forest, his breath heavy and his sword stained with blood. His battle with the enemy had been fierce, but now, with the dust settling, he found himself facing a far more complicated enemy, Zara. She wasn't just a survivor. She wasn't just some helpless woman in need of saving. She was powerful, dangerous, and the last thing he expected. Her smirk lingered in his mind, the way her eyes sparkled with both fire and mystery. He couldn't understand why he felt drawn to her. She wasn't like the others. Most people he saved were grateful, offering nothing but thanks. Zara? She was different. She was cold, calculating, but there was something more beneath that. He glanced at her as she stood beside him, her posture relaxed despite the chaos around them. She was tall, her body lean and toned, every movement purposeful. The warrior couldn't help but notice how her strength emanated from her. She wasn't just some damsel in distress, she was a force to be reckoned with. So, he began, breaking the silence, "Now that we've made it out alive, what's next?" Zara turned toward him, her eyes locking with his. "Now," she said slowly, her voice low and tinged with authority, "we finish what we started." The warrior raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly did we start?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze to the horizon, where the ruins of her kingdom could be seen in the distance. "My people think I'm dead," she said quietly. "But they're wrong. I'm alive, and I'm going to take back what's mine." He stared at her, understanding beginning to dawn on him. This wasn't just about survival. This wasn't some random rescue. She needed him. Not just to fight, but to help her reclaim her throne. "You need me to help you take back your throne," he said, stating the obvious. Zara's lips curled into a faint smile. "Exactly. But that doesn't mean I trust you. I don't trust anyone, especially not someone who just stumbled into my life." The warrior didn't flinch. He'd dealt with distrust before, but there was something in her tone that caught him off guard. It wasn't just distrust, it was something deeper. A fear, perhaps, or a vulnerability she was too proud to show. "Then why didn't you leave me to die back there?" he asked, his voice soft yet challenging. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Because for all your arrogance, you're the only one who can help me. You're a soldier. You've got a skill for surviving, and you've got an army behind you. You're useful, for now." He didn't know whether to be offended or impressed by her bluntness, but he knew one thing, he wasn't going to back down. He was in this now, whether she liked it or not. "I don't work for free," he said, his tone even but firm. "You want me to help you, we do this together. No more games." Zara's smile grew wider, almost mocking. "You think you're in control? You're just another pawn in this game. But for now, you're right. We'll work together." Her words hung in the air between them, thick with tension. She didn't care for him, and he wasn't sure if he could trust her either. But there was no turning back now. He could feel the pull of her, something he couldn't explain. "Fine," he said, lowering his sword slightly. "We do this together. But when it's over, we'll settle things. I don't like being used." Zara's eyes sparkled with a dangerous glint. You'll get what's coming to you, warrior. But not yet. Just then, the distant sound of approaching footsteps snapped them both back into the moment. They weren't alone. The enemy was still out there, and they needed to keep moving. As they moved through the forest, the tension between them was palpable. There was a sharpness in the air, an unsaid understanding that they were both walking a fine line. She might need him, but he knew better than to trust her completely. Their journey wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about power, betrayal, and something neither of them had expected, a bond that neither of them was ready for. As they came to a clearing, Zara stopped, looking around cautiously. The warrior's instincts kicked in. He felt it before he saw it, another group of soldiers, this time not from the enemy army, but from her own. "Get ready," Zara whispered, her hand subtly reaching for the hilt of her blade. "We're about to find out just how loyal my people really are." He nodded, his hand gripping his sword tighter. This wasn't just about reclaiming a throne. This was a battle for trust. For power. And the stakes were higher than either of them realized. The soldiers emerged from the trees, eyes locked on Zara. But they weren't here to help her. They were here to bring her back to the enemy who had abandoned her, back to the life she was supposed to have left behind. "You were dead," one of them said, his voice shaking. "The king, your father, ordered your execution. You can't be alive." Zara's eyes narrowed. "I am alive, and I'll take what's mine." With a flick of her wrist, her blade was out, gleaming in the dim light. The warrior stood at her side, ready for whatever came next. But Zara's smile was what caught him off guard. It was cruel, confident, and dangerous. "Let's see if they're still loyal," she murmured, as the soldiers circled in. As the first sword struck, the warrior couldn't help but wonder, was Zara really the ally he thought she was, or was she playing him like everyone else? The battle had only just begun, and the lines between loyalty and betrayal were starting to blur. Naughty question for the comment section. Do you think Zara will prove to be a true ally, or is she using the warrior for her own gain? What do you think her real plan is? Let us know your theories. The battle had begun, and the warrior quickly realized that he was in the thick of something far larger than he ever anticipated. Zara fought like a demon unleashed, her blade cutting through the air with precision and grace. The soldiers around them were no match for her skill, but there was something unnerving about the way she fought. It wasn't just for survival, it was for dominance. For control. The warrior, at first, was caught off guard by the intensity of the fight, but it didn't take him long to get into the rhythm. He matched Zara's pace, moving fluidly, defending her with each strike while also taking down their enemies. There was a certain synergy between them, an unspoken bond that formed quickly under the pressure of battle. But every time their eyes met, there was a tension that neither of them acknowledged. It wasn't just about the fight. It was about the power. The power she wanted. The power she craved. As the last soldier fell to the ground, Zara stood over him, her chest heaving with the exertion of battle. Her eyes were cold, focused, as if the life had just been drained from her. She looked at the warrior, her expression unreadable. "Impressive," she said, wiping the blood from her blade. Her voice was calm, but there was something else there, something darker, something more calculating. "I expected more resistance, but I suppose you're better than I thought." The warrior wiped the sweat from his brow, his own sword dripping with blood. His muscles ached from the fight, but his mind was racing. He knew there was something more to this woman, something he couldn't quite grasp. She wasn't just a ruler seeking her throne, she was someone who wanted to reshape everything around her. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "What is it that you really want, Zara? Power? Revenge? Or something else?" Zara turned her head slowly, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "You're getting too close to the truth, warrior. Maybe I'll let you figure it out." The warrior clenched his jaw, frustration bubbling beneath his calm exterior. He had saved her, fought beside her, and yet she still kept him at arm's length. He had always known the cost of alliances, but something about her, something about the way she seemed so self-assured, so in control, made him uneasy. "I didn't come here to be your pawn," he said firmly. You needed me to take back your throne, but I'm starting to wonder if I'm just another piece on your chessboard. Zara's lips curled into a sly smile, and for a moment, she almost looked amused. You think you're the only one who can play this game? You're not a pawn, warrior. But that doesn't mean you're not expendable. The word stung, but the warrior didn't show it. He had heard worse, been betrayed before. But there was something about Zara, her strength, her ambition, the way she wielded power like a weapon, that both drew him in and made him wary. Then why keep me around? He asked, his voice sharp with a mixture of challenge and curiosity. She stepped closer, their bodies mere inches apart. Her breath was warm against his skin, and the scent of blood and sweat hung heavy in the air. Because, she whispered, her voice like silk, I need you. But I don't need you in the way you think. For a split second, the warrior felt the ground beneath him shift. It wasn't just the words, there was a promise in her gaze, something dangerous. She wasn't just using him for power. She was using him for something deeper, something more personal. What does that mean? He asked, though he already knew. He could feel it in the way she looked at him. Zara didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned, walking toward the edge of the forest, her body graceful and deliberate, every movement commanding attention. The warrior watched her for a moment before following. I'll show you, she said, without turning around. But be warned, warrior. The cost of power is higher than you think. They walked in silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. The warrior's mind raced as they made their way deeper into the forest. What was Zara planning? What did she really want from him? He could feel the pull, the attraction to her, but it wasn't just physical. It was something else, something far more dangerous. After a long silence, they arrived at a secluded clearing, a small camp with a fire already burning. The warrior had no idea where they were, but he didn't ask. He was too focused on Zara, on the way she moved, on the way her eyes gleamed with ambition. She turned to him, her expression no longer cold, but something darker, a mix of intensity and calculation. I'm not just after a throne, warrior, she said, her voice steady. I'm after everything. Power, control, freedom from the chains that have bound my people. And I'm willing to do anything to get it. The warrior's gaze locked onto hers. He didn't flinch. He couldn't. There was something about her, something that made him want to follow her, to believe in her. But he also knew that power like hers came at a cost. A cost that could consume him if he wasn't careful. I didn't sign up for this, he said, his voice low. I came to help you, not to lose myself in your games. Zara stepped closer, her face inches from his. Then don't, she whispered, her breath warm against his lips. But I'm not asking you to follow me. I'm asking you to rule beside me. And if you're not ready for that, then maybe it's better we part ways here. Her words hit him like a wave, and for a moment, he was lost in the fire of her eyes. But he knew better than to be swayed so easily. There was no turning back now. He was already too deep. As she moved away, leaving him to ponder her words, the warrior's heart raced. Was she playing him? Was this alliance really the right choice, or was he about to fall into her web of power, betrayal, and ambition? The deeper he got, the more dangerous it became. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going anywhere. Naughty question for the comment section. Do you think the warrior can trust Zara, or is she playing him for her own gain? What do you think her real motives are? Let us know your thoughts. The air was thick with tension as the warrior and Zara ventured deeper into the heart of enemy territory. They were no longer just two people fighting for survival, now, they were an alliance, though a fragile one. The warrior still didn't trust Zara completely, but there was no denying the undeniable chemistry between them. Something unspoken, a pull that neither could ignore, even if neither was willing to admit it yet. Zara led the way through the darkened forest, her movements precise and calculated. She had an air of confidence about her, a power that couldn't be ignored. But beneath it, the warrior saw something else, vulnerability. It was brief, like a shadow that passed over her eyes, but it was there. They had been planning this for days. Zara had received word that one of her loyal generals, someone who had once been a close confidant, had been captured by the enemy. She couldn't afford to lose him, he was essential to her plan to reclaim her kingdom. They had to act fast. Zara's face remained calm, but the warrior could see the fire in her eyes. She wasn't just going to rescue him, she was going to send a message. She wasn't weak. She wasn't afraid. She was the ruler she was meant to be, and nothing was going to stop her. As they neared the enemy camp, Zara stopped abruptly. She turned to face the warrior, her expression unreadable. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice low and dangerous. "We're not just here to rescue him. We're here to make sure they never forget who we are." The warrior's heart pounded. He wasn't sure what she meant by that, but he knew enough to know that Zara didn't do anything half-heartedly. She was playing a game far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. They crept through the shadows, moving swiftly and silently. The camp was heavily guarded, but Zara seemed to know exactly where to go. She led him through the back entrance, where the guards were few, and the tension in the air thickened with every step. The warrior's mind raced. This wasn't just a rescue mission, it was a declaration. Zara had made it clear. She was showing the world that she wasn't to be underestimated. She was willing to do whatever it took to reclaim her throne, even if it meant shedding a little blood along the way. As they reached the holding cells, the warrior's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword. Zara glanced at him and gave a slight nod, signaling that they were close. They moved in, and the warrior's senses heightened as the smell of damp stone and sweat filled the air. The silence of the night was interrupted only by the occasional sound of a distant guard's footsteps. Zara stopped in front of one of the cells. There, chained to the wall, was her general. His face was battered, his clothes torn, but his eyes were still filled with fire. When he saw Zara, he tried to stand, but the chains pulled him back down. "You came for me," he whispered, his voice rough with exhaustion. Zara stepped forward, her face softening for a brief moment. "Of course I did. You're worth more than all of them combined." But the warrior didn't trust this moment of tenderness. It wasn't like Zara to show mercy, not unless there was something more to it. She was a master of manipulation, and the warrior knew she was playing her own game, even if it meant using her general's life to send a message. Zara turned to him, her eyes sharp once again. "Let's make this quick. We can't afford to stay here too long." The warrior moved to the chains, but just as his hand reached out, a guard appeared, walking down the corridor. The warrior froze, his eyes locking with Zara's for a split second. They didn't need to say anything, their bond was understood in that moment. Zara took a step forward, her body now in front of him, blocking the guard's line of sight. She smiled sweetly, her voice calm but dangerous. "I see you, soldier," she said, her tone sugary sweet. "But I'm afraid you're in the wrong place." The guard paused, clearly confused. Zara's smile widened, and without warning, she lunged at him. The warrior moved at the same time, drawing his sword and silencing the guard before he could make a sound. It all happened so quickly. The warrior wiped the blood from his blade and turned to Zara, who was already unlocking the chains that held her general. "Thank you," the general whispered, his voice full of gratitude, but Zara didn't acknowledge him. Instead, she looked at the warrior with something more, something deeper. The warrior felt a strange sense of discomfort, but he pushed it aside. This wasn't the time for questions. They needed to move. Zara motioned for the general to follow them, and they began to retreat through the narrow hallways. But just as they reached the exit, a shout rang out from behind them. "They're escaping," a guard screamed. Zara's eyes narrowed. She turned to the warrior, her voice low and filled with intent. "We finish this now." The warrior nodded. He didn't know what Zara had planned, but he wasn't about to back down. They fought their way out of the camp, cutting down anyone who got in their path. Zara was a whirlwind of lethal precision, and the warrior followed her lead. As they made their way to the edge of the camp, the general, now freed, turned to the warrior. "You're a part of something much bigger now. Don't forget that." The warrior's heart pounded. What had he gotten himself into? He had saved Zara, yes, but it was clear now that he was being pulled deeper into her world, a world where loyalty and betrayal were intertwined. A world where Zara ruled with an iron fist, no matter who stood beside her. As they made their escape into the night, the warrior couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Who else knew about their mission? Who else would come after them? Zara had played her cards, but the game was far from over. Naughty question for the comment section. Do you think Zara is playing the warrior, or is she truly starting to trust him? What do you think her real plan is now that her general is free? Let us know your thoughts. The camp was behind them now, the sound of pursuit growing fainter with each step they took into the forest. The moonlight barely pierced through the thick canopy above, casting long shadows on the ground. The air felt heavy, as though it carried the weight of something more than just the night's escape. The warrior walked slightly behind Zara, his hand still firmly gripping the hilt of his sword, his senses alert. Every crack of a twig, every rustle of leaves made him tense, but Zara walked ahead as if nothing could touch her. It was then he realized how far she had come. How much she had changed from the woman he first encountered, tied up and vulnerable, desperate for salvation. Now, she was a queen in the making, a woman who would stop at nothing to reclaim what she believed was hers. He couldn't help but wonder how much of this was just survival. And how much of it was a deep, insatiable hunger for power. Zara slowed her pace, turning to look at him, her expression unreadable. Her eyes flickered for a moment, something akin to regret? No, it was gone too quickly for him to be sure. We're almost there, she said, her voice low, but steady. Once we reach the safe house, I can start rallying my forces. We'll move quickly, before the enemy realizes what's happened. The warrior nodded, his mind racing with thoughts of what came next. He had joined this fight to help her, but every day it felt like the stakes were higher. Zara was a woman with a plan, and he was merely a piece in her game. But as he looked at her, he wondered if it was more than just a game to her. She wasn't just playing for a throne, she was playing for control, for power. And that made him question his place in all of this. They reached the safe house, a small, hidden cabin tucked deep in the forest. The general followed close behind, his eyes darting nervously around, as though he expected someone to jump out at any moment. The warrior couldn't blame him. The walls were thick with tension, and Zara, despite her calm demeanor, seemed to be carrying a weight that threatened to crush her. Inside, the safe house was sparse. A few wooden chairs, a rough-hewn table, and a couple of makeshift cots were the only signs of life. But it wasn't the room that held his attention, it was Zara. She moved with purpose, her eyes constantly calculating, her every movement deliberate. She was no longer just the woman he had rescued. She was a leader, someone who had long ago shed any remnants of weakness. "You'll want to rest," the warrior said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, but it held an edge of concern he hadn't meant to let slip. Zara didn't look at him. She was busy unpacking supplies, her movements sharp. Rest? Now? When we're this close to victory? She scoffed, not even looking up. We don't stop until it's done. I didn't come this far just to rest. The warrior's brow furrowed. Victory? Is that what this is for you? She paused for a moment, turning to face him, her eyes flashing. What else would it be for? I've been given nothing but betrayal. I fight for what's mine, for what's rightfully owed to me. The warrior stood still, studying her. He could feel the weight of her words, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her quest than she was letting on. This wasn't just about a kingdom, there was something darker lurking beneath the surface. Zara saw his hesitation and stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you think I want, warrior? To rule a broken land? To wear a crown and sit on a throne while others decide my fate? Her voice was colder now, harder. I want control, not just of a kingdom, but of everything. The power to decide who lives and who dies. To shape the world in my image. The warrior's heart pounded. He had seen ambition before, hell, he had been part of it. But there was something in Zara's words, something cold and calculating, that sent a chill down his spine. She wasn't just fighting for a throne. She was fighting for complete domination. And he was tangled in her web, whether he liked it or not. He took a step back, his hand instinctively tightening around his sword. "I didn't sign up for this," he said quietly, his voice laced with both resolve and fear. "I didn't come here to help you become a tyrant." Zara's gaze softened for a moment, but the edge in her eyes remained. "Then why are you still here, warrior?" she asked, her voice barely a breath. "If you think I'm a tyrant, why haven't you left?" The question hung in the air, thick with meaning. The warrior opened his mouth to respond, but words failed him. The truth was, he didn't know why. He had no loyalty to her beyond their alliance, no personal stake in her claim to the throne. But something about her drive, kept him here. It was as if she had become a force of nature, and he was helpless to stop it. "Because you're not the only one who's been wronged," he said finally, his voice rough. "Because I see the fire in your eyes. And I can't just walk away from that." Zara's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "That's what I thought," she murmured. "We're more alike than you want to admit." The warrior didn't respond. He couldn't. She was right. There was a part of him, buried deep within, that understood her drive for power. He wasn't here just to help her reclaim her throne. He was here because, in some twisted way, he understood the price of power all too well. The general, who had been silently observing, stepped forward. "We've waited long enough," he said. "The enemy is closing in. If we're going to strike, we need to move now." Zara nodded, turning to the general. "Prepare the men," she ordered. "We leave at first light." The warrior's gaze followed her as she moved with purpose. He didn't know what the next day would bring. He didn't know if he was still a part of her plan or if he was just another pawn in her game. But he knew one thing for sure, there was no going back. Zara had awakened something in him, and now he was too deep in her world to escape. As they prepared to leave, the warrior couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Zara's plan was dangerous, and as they headed into the night, he wondered if he was truly her ally, or if he was just another tool in her quest for power. Naughty question for the comment section. Do you think Zara's quest for power will end in victory, or will it consume her? And what role do you think the warrior will play in all of this? Let us know your thoughts. The night was thick with tension as they marched toward the enemy stronghold. The moon, partially hidden behind a veil of clouds, cast an eerie glow over the warriors as they moved in silence. The camp was alive with whispers, the sound of soldiers preparing for the final battle. Zara walked at the front, her eyes locked on the horizon, her face set in a mask of determination. Beside her, the warrior stayed close, his mind still grappling with everything that had happened. The previous days had been a blur, constant planning, training, and strategizing. Zara had been relentless, pushing them all to their limits. She was the leader they needed, but the more the warrior saw of her, the more he realized just how dangerous she truly was. She wasn't just fighting for her kingdom. She was fighting for something much more personal, control. Absolute control. The warrior couldn't deny it. She had a vision. And it was powerful. But he also couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. There was a sense of unease gnawing at him. Something about Zara's plans didn't sit right. There was a darkness in her, a willingness to sacrifice anything and anyone to get what she wanted. They reached the edge of the enemy camp just as the sun began to rise. The landscape was still quiet, the calm before the storm. Zara paused, giving a signal to her men. They dropped to a crouch, their eyes scanning the camp ahead. The general, still loyal but visibly nervous, turned to Zara. "We've done everything you've asked," he said, his voice low. "But something doesn't feel right." "Are you sure about this?" "About everything." Zara turned to face him, her expression as cold and calculating as ever. "You don't get to question me," she snapped. "We've come this far. There's no turning back now." The warrior could see the tension between them, the crack in their alliance. Zara wasn't just leading them to the enemy's doorstep, she was leading them to war. And war didn't just kill enemies, it killed alliances. It killed trust. As they began to move closer to the heart of the camp, the warrior felt it. That uneasy feeling that had been following him for days. He turned to Zara, but before he could speak, something caught his eye. In the shadows, he saw movement, too much movement. The general had slipped away from the group. The warrior's instincts kicked in. He couldn't ignore it. He had been trained to spot danger before it arrived, and right now, danger was approaching from every direction. He silently signaled to Zara, his eyes narrowing as he followed the general's trail. Zara, noticing his sudden shift in attention, turned to him. "What's going on?" The warrior didn't answer immediately. He was already moving, creeping through the underbrush. Zara followed close behind, her footsteps light but swift. The air was thick with tension. The warrior's heart pounded in his chest as he neared the edge of the enemy camp. And that's when he saw it, an exchange of glances between the general and a group of enemy soldiers. The betrayal was as clear as day. The general was not only in league with the enemy, he was one of their key informants. He had been playing them from the start. The warrior's blood ran cold. He had trusted him. He had fought beside him. And now, everything was falling apart. "Zara," the warrior hissed, his voice low but urgent. "It's a trap. The general's working with them." Zara's eyes flashed with a cold fury. "I knew something wasn't right. But this is more than I expected." She didn't hesitate. Zara's expression darkened as she pulled her blade from its sheath. "We deal with him now," she said, her voice like ice. The warrior's mind raced. He knew the danger of the situation. If the general had truly betrayed them, it wasn't just his life at risk, it was the entire mission. The enemy knew they were coming, and they were ready. The plan had already been compromised. They moved quickly, making their way toward the general's location. The warrior could hear the faint sound of voices ahead. They were too close now. They had no choice but to confront him, and the thought of what would happen next weighed heavily on his shoulders. Zara wasn't going to let this go easily. She would take revenge, and she would do it without hesitation. They reached the clearing where the general stood, speaking quietly with the enemy commanders. The warrior's hand tightened around his sword. This was it. The betrayal was about to cost someone their life. "General!" Zara's voice rang out, cold and commanding. The general's eyes widened in shock, but it quickly turned to a sneer. "So, the little princess is still alive. I had hoped you'd stay dead, Zara." The warrior stepped forward, his sword raised, but Zara held up a hand, stopping him. "No," she said softly, her voice almost sad. "You don't get the luxury of dying by my hand." She turned to the enemy commanders, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "This was never about you. This was about me. And now, you're going to pay for betraying me." The general tried to step forward, but Zara was faster. She moved with lightning speed, her blade cutting through the air in a smooth arc. The general barely had time to react before his body crumpled to the ground. Zara didn't even flinch. She stood over him, her eyes cold and indifferent. The warrior watched, his heart heavy. This was not what he had signed up for. He had joined this fight to help Zara, to see justice done, but now he was starting to question if he was on the right side. Was this really about power, or had she become something more dangerous? Zara turned to face him, wiping the blood from her blade with a calm precision. "There's no place for weakness in this world," she said, her voice hard and cold. "And if you don't understand that, then you're no better than he was." The warrior felt the weight of her words. He had seen her strength, her resilience. But now, he was seeing the price of that power. It wasn't just bloodshed, it was a path that led to something darker. Something he wasn't sure he wanted to follow. As Zara turned away, her cold demeanor unbroken, the warrior realized just how far she was willing to go to achieve her goals. He wasn't sure anymore if he was her ally or just another piece in her game. But one thing was certain, this battle was far from over, and the consequences of their actions would follow them wherever they went. Naughty question for the comment section. Do you think Zara's actions are justified, or is she losing herself to power? Where do you think this betrayal will lead next? Let us know your thoughts. The air felt different now. It was thick with an impending storm, both literal and metaphorical. The warrior couldn't shake the tension that had built up ever since Zara's cold execution of the general. It was clear to him now, this wasn't just a battle for a throne. This was something deeper. Zara was playing for something much bigger. And as they neared the heart of the enemy's stronghold, he felt a sense of dread settle in his chest. Zara had become a force. A force that he wasn't sure could be stopped. She had already sacrificed so much, and her thirst for power seemed endless. The warrior had followed her, fought alongside her, and seen the destruction that lay in her wake. But now, as they neared the final confrontation, he couldn't help but wonder what it would cost them both. They stood at the entrance of the stronghold, their last barrier before they could take control of the throne. The enemy forces were formidable, but Zara was ready. She had trained her loyal soldiers, built an army from the ashes of her fallen kingdom, and now, they would strike. She had been relentless, and the warrior knew that she would stop at nothing to win. This is it, Zara said quietly, her voice calm but filled with the promise of destruction. Once we take the throne, nothing will ever be the same. For me. For you. For all of them. The warrior couldn't deny the truth in her words. There was no going back now. The battle ahead would decide everything. The gates to the stronghold were massive, but Zara had no intention of using force to break through. She had spies inside, allies hidden among the enemy's ranks. As they approached, the warrior noticed her subtle movements, the way she held her head high, the confidence that radiated from her. She was no longer the desperate, vulnerable woman he had met all those weeks ago. She was a queen in the making. With a wave of her hand, the gates began to open. The warrior felt a surge of adrenaline, the realization that they were about to walk into the lion's den. But Zara wasn't afraid. She walked forward without hesitation, and her soldiers followed her lead. Inside, the stronghold was a maze of corridors, dark and silent. The enemy soldiers hadn't noticed their arrival yet, but it wouldn't be long. Zara motioned for the warrior to stay close. The final showdown was approaching, and everything was about to change. As they moved deeper into the heart of the fortress, the warrior could feel his pulse quicken. There was a sense of finality in the air. This wasn't just another battle, it was the culmination of everything Zara had fought for, everything she had sacrificed. It was her moment. And he was right there beside her, ready to fight for her, ready to fight for power. Suddenly, they heard voices ahead. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hall, and Zara's soldiers immediately dropped to the floor, blending into the shadows. The warrior followed her lead, crouching low as the enemy passed by. His heart raced as the tension grew thicker. Then, a shout rang out, cutting through the silence. Intruders! Zara's eyes narrowed. Without a word, she sprang into action, her blade flashing through the air. The warrior was right behind her, his sword slicing through the air as he cut down the enemy soldiers one by one. The battle was fierce, but Zara moved with a fluid grace that made her seem unstoppable. Every strike, every movement was calculated, and it was clear that she wasn't just fighting for survival, she was fighting to dominate. The warrior watched her, his heart pounding. She wasn't just fighting for power. She was fighting for control of everything, and that control came at a cost. He had seen her transform before his eyes. From a desperate survivor to a queen with a cold, ruthless vision. He had helped her get here, but now, as the battle raged on, he couldn't help but feel that he was losing himself in her world. They fought their way to the throne room, where the final confrontation awaited. The massive doors loomed before them, guarded by the last of the enemy's elite forces. Zara's soldiers formed a line behind her, ready to strike. The warrior stood beside her, his sword drawn, his heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. When the doors finally opened, Zara stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with the promise of victory. The enemy's leader, a man who had once been a trusted ally, stood at the far end of the room, waiting for them. His expression was one of defiance, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. "You've come for my throne, Zara," the enemy leader sneered. "But you won't have it. Not as long as I breathe." Zara didn't flinch. She moved closer, her voice low and filled with venom. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." With a swift motion, she lunged at him, her blade piercing his chest. The warrior's heart skipped a beat as the enemy leader fell to the ground, his life extinguished in an instant. The room fell silent. Zara stood over him, her chest rising and falling with each breath. She had won. The throne was hers. But as she turned to face the warrior, he saw it in her eyes, the cost of her victory. She was no longer the woman he had once fought alongside. She had become something else entirely. As Zara stood victorious, the warrior couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't over. She had won the throne, but at what cost? What kind of ruler would she become now that she had everything she ever wanted? And more importantly, what kind of person would he become, standing at her side? Naughty question for the comment section. Do you think Zara will be a just ruler, or will her thirst for power consume her? And what role will the warrior play in her reign? Let us know your thoughts.